Above and beyond. What the heck does that even mean? Like, how do I go above and beyond on an issue?
Okay, I'm gonna recommend a few different ideas here. I'm gonna let me preface this with the baby step. I'll just tell you what the baby step is right off the bat. The main baby step here is to recognize whether this issue is even a good candidate for this criteria, because not all issues are going to be possible for this one, or a good choice for for this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you the meaning of this criteria, the kind of the essence of it or the spirit of it. What are hiring managers really asking for when they say that? And then I'm just going to walk through a bunch of examples, and I think hopefully it'll become clear by the end. And I'll try to highlight some signals that you can notice that might let you know that this issue is a good candidate for this particular criteria. So first, let me read the exact text of this criteria. One example of a PR where the solution goes beyond the acceptance criteria for the issue. Beyond the acceptance criteria, that means they would have accepted your solution regardless, but you went beyond what they were even asking for. Are they looking to solve the issue at the root cause instead of dealing with the symptoms? We'll talk more. I think at least one of the examples that I'll give has to do with that, with the root cause. Do they identify other related areas of the code base where the same problem solution is applicable? Do they think about details that are not explicitly asked for, e.g. writing unit tests or updating documentation? Do they consider other aspects of the product like performance or security? So I'll tell you, out of all of this, it's a pretty large paragraph. In my conversations with hiring managers, the sentence that really made their eyes light up is this one. Are they looking to solve the issue at the root cause instead of dealing with the symptoms? So we'll delve into that. Now, let me tell you, I'll try to summarize the essence of this. So the main question here is, are you trying to do it the right way? Or are you trying to do it in a more superficial, quick and dirty approach? In software engineering, it's very, very common to lean towards a quick and dirty approach instead of doing it the quote unquote right way. And I'll give you some examples. A very simple example that I think we can all relate to, something that perhaps it's a temptation that we struggle with from the very beginning of our software engineering career: global variables. Have you ever been in this situation where you're writing a program and you need some variables passed around, and you know a super quick solution is, I could just use global variables for that, right? It's easy. But it's not recommended. Typically, a better practice is to pass the variables around using helper functions and so on. But then that often takes more time. You got to design the helper functions. You got to pass in the parameters and stuff. And so, yeah, that's one example. Quick and dirty versus doing it the right way. Another example. Let's suppose you need some functionality on a page of your app, and that functionality already exists on some other page. It could be very tempting to just copy paste, be like, oh, easy, I'll just copy paste from that page onto this page, and now both pages have it. Easy, but now you've got a problem because you've got duplicate code. So a better solution usually is to make the code more modular and reusable. Maybe you have some kind of a shared library that both pages use. So again, quick and dirty versus doing it the right way. Doing it the right way usually takes more time. Okay, the next three examples are actual open source examples, things that have actually happened. So I'm going to show you an example from a contribution to Nexus Mods. Their pull request was accepted. So their pull request met the acceptance criteria. There's actually going to be two different examples for this one case. This one pull request, I'm going to highlight two different ways that the original students, the contributors, could have gone above and beyond. So the first one, I'm going to highlight a comment that was made by a maintainer. So the maintainer mentioned this not as a serious comment. This is more an offhand comment. He said, being able to queue synchronized operations is actually something we would like to have for the future, but might be out of scope for this PR. So if the students wanted to, they could have implemented this queuing solution. So this was kind of handed to them, like, hey, if you really want to go above and beyond, you could do this. And in fact, ironically, the students did try some version of that, but then the maintainer said, no, this is not really what we meant, and then they kind of reverted it. But they could have tried to persist and actually implement the queue solution properly, and I'm sure the maintainers would have appreciated that. Here's another example on the same pull request. So the interesting thing about their solution, I'm going to show you the actual diff of their solution now. Their solution solves a problem. The bug goes away. And the maintainers even accepted it. So the maintainers agreed, like, okay, great, good solution. But what's interesting is that if you actually do the root cause analysis of the true cause of the bug, they didn't actually solve the root cause of the bug. They kind of put a Band-Aid over it. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So the actual cause of the bug has to do with this with lock syntax. The locking, there's something wrong with it. It throws an exception when it shouldn't. But their solution was to basically wrap the whole thing in a try-catch. And they have this semaphore thing, which basically it's like a better locking mechanism to use the semaphore. And so in a way, this lock takes precedence over these locks. Anyway, you don't have to understand what I'm saying, but long story short, this lock basically makes it so that these locks never even get used or triggered. So the problem is avoided, basically. So the problem goes away in the end. But did they really solve the root cause? Not really, because these locks still have a problem. They just found a way to not trigger the locks anymore because they wrapped these locks in like an even bigger lock. So anyway, this is an example where sometimes even the maintainers don't necessarily know the root cause. This is this was a complicated one. If you went, we do have a case study on this one, on this Nexus Mods issue, if you're curious to really get into the weeds on this one. But just illustrating this for an example. So, okay, I'm the main takeaway here. Again, don't worry if you don't understand the details of what I just said. The main takeaway here is the symptoms or the signals. What could you have noticed about this issue that could have told you that this issue is a good candidate for this this above and beyond criteria? There are two signals you could have noticed. Number one, when the maintainers start offering nice to haves, like, hey, it would be nice to eventually do this, or we don't need to do it right now, but yeah, like a better solution would be to implement XYZ. When the maintainers are saying stuff like that, pay attention. That's a sign that this issue has a much wider surface area than you might realize, that there are ways to go above and beyond here. The other signal you can notice is if you're doing a root cause analysis and it's kind of, if it's taking a lot of effort to write out the steps and to get to the root cause, that's another sign that this issue is probably a good candidate for this criteria. I'm going to show you one final example here from my personal experience where I did not solve the issue at the root cause, but this, unlike the Nexus Mods one, the maintainer called me out on it and rejected my solution because it did not get to the root cause. So here it is. This is a contribution I made to the WeVote project. There was a bug and I'm going to show you my root cause analysis. So to my credit, my root cause analysis was good, and it was correct, and it ultimately did help the maintainer come up with the right solution. But I was able to distill the problem down into a series of steps, and I wrote down the root cause. Like step 5's happened before, before I think it was this one, before step 3. So that's a problem. The fix should somehow make it happen in the right order. And I came up with a fix, which was a one-liner. It was a one-liner fix that I thought, wow, this solves a problem. The maintainer saw that and was very suspicious, and he ended up rejecting my PR. But he did take inspiration from my root cause analysis, and he submitted a better PR. This was his fix. So more complicated than mine, right? So mine was a one-liner, but to do it properly, this is what it took. And interestingly, I asked him about it later, and I said, "How did you know to do that? Like, how did you, how did you figure out that my solution wasn't good enough?" And it came down to testing. He said there were a number of edge cases he tested where my solution wouldn't have worked, and he even listed them out. There was like 5 cases that I didn't test. So again, this kind of connects to another criteria that you may have heard about from our partnership agreements, which is the importance of testing edge cases. So anyway, the important thing to note here is a signal you can pay attention to is the root cause analysis. If the root cause analysis is turning out to take a lot of effort for you to get to the bottom of it, that's a green light that this issue is a good candidate. So I've given you some cues, some signals to notice. I'll also just give you one final baby step here, which is just do the root cause analysis. At the very least, you can start out by writing out the steps that the code is doing as a series of steps, and see if you can get to the root cause here. Although, what do you do if it's not a bug, right? So that example I just showed you was for a bug. Well, you could do this for a feature as well. In a way, the earlier example for Nexus mods, the use of queues, is a great example of how you can go above and beyond even for a feature, right? So to implement this feature properly, maybe they could have used a queue to do something. So both for features and bugs, you can there are opportunities to go above and beyond. Sometimes it depends on the issue. Okay, so just to summarize, the baby step you can do, just try to recognize if this issue is a good candidate for this criteria.